I've been thinking a lot about clouds. I spent a total of like 400 hours this year just thinking about clouds. The cell shading on this loop in particular took 40 hours. My animation partner Brittany spent days on the cleanup stage. Watching hours turn into days and then days turn into a week, just cell shading something I thought would take a few hours at most is a pretty surreal experience. It's kind of like when you have a dream that feels like hours and hours have passed by, and then you wake up and look at the clock and you see that only 10 minutes have passed. It's kind of like that, but the complete opposite. Animating has a weird way of warping time because you're thinking frame by frame in slow motion. It takes so many hours to animate only a few seconds worth of movement. The result is that real life gets sped up while the animation world you're making moves at a snail's pace. It's also interesting that whatever subject matter you're drawing or focusing on, you start to notice it a lot more in real life. While I was animating clouds, I was ultra aware of all the nuances and differences in shape and color of the clouds in the sky. When I would go on my daily walk, I would almost feel overstimulated trying to take in all the cloud shapes in the vast sky. There's something humbling about looking into the infinite sky and realizing you're only seeing an incredibly small portion of all the sky and clouds that exist at this moment in time stretching across planet Earth. I'm getting to the point where I don't ever want to see a cloud again in my life. Now I'm going to do a live demo of how you can make one of these gooey cloud loops. So you can see this cloud loop here. There is a lot of lines and shading and stuff to keep track of. So you might look at this animation and think this would have been a headache to animate. And, well, this is true. However, I didn't just draw one finished drawing and then go on to the next drawing. To make this more manageable, what I really did was just start out with one little blob and then go through the cycle just straight ahead, kind of improvising. Maybe draw a couple keyframes here and there to help me go from point A to point B. But for the most part, I was just drawing one little blob at a time, and you can see this blob then kind of shrinks and then dissipates into the cloud. And after I do one little blob, I'd go over it on a second pass and then draw another blob around it. This made it much more manageable. If you were to animate one of these cloud style loops from scratch, this is how I would go about doing it. Now, this is going to be kind of more like smoke, so this can apply to smoke animation as well. And what I do is just start out with this little point to ground it. This is where the smoke or cloud is going to be originating from. It doesn't just come out of nowhere or from random spots. There's a point to where it comes from. And then I would draw this motion path. Now, this is just a rough guide, but it kind of helps you visualize the direction you want your animation to be moving in to kind of keep you a little bit more on track. So I'm just going to start going by frame, and I'm on 15 frames a second. So I'm starting out small, this little kind of circular shape. It just slowly grows bigger, and the spacing will gradually get a little bit wider so that it is increasing in speed. Then it's gonna really get a lot larger up here. I'm gonna kind of have it tapering towards the bottom part, so it's gonna be thicker on the right side and then kind of get smaller on the left side. Then I'm gonna have it kind of slow down up here, maybe bulge out a little bit. And then this is kind of like your bouncing ball animation where it gets slower and closer spacing on the apex of the bounce. And then it's gonna start to speed up and go down this motion path. And these are just rough drawings. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just figuring out the general motion and movement here. And before I go further, I'm just gonna play this, see what we have. So that's what it looks like so far. And you can see it slows down, speeds up. It's gonna come back down here, and I'm gonna have it shrink, and then start to grow again as it comes up. as if the smoke is absorbing oxygen and expanding. But again, this is a cloud, something in between a billowing smoke and a cloud. Then it's gonna shrink and dissipate. If this were a timing chart, it would kind of look something like this, where you have the start of the animation here, the end frame here. It starts out very slow and then gradually picks up in speed, and this is the spacing. These little dashes represent the spacing in between the frames. But then on this one, it starts to decelerate and it gets slow again in the middle at the apex of the bounce here. And then it speeds up again and then slows down and dissipates. After you have one little blob, you just go over a second time. And what I might do is, instead of just starting at the beginning here, I might start more around here and just kind of imagine what kind of cloud shape I want here. So just maybe make another shape here, then go backwards and start to connect this in. You just kind of go straight ahead animation, improvise with these shapes. It's very intuitive. It's something you might have to practice a few times, but the concept is just to do one little blob at a time, and you kind of just start out with one blob and then have other blobs improvising and moving around the one blob. They can even come out forward and swirl around. Okay, right here, I'm gonna have this piece of smoke or cloud, whatever you want to call it, goopy goop, whatever. It's gonna be kind of stretching and it's gonna break apart from the main mass, the main body here. So I'm gonna have it get narrower in this tension point right here. It's gonna get narrow and then it's going to break apart. I like to have a little ball right here where it broke apart and then that part just dissipates. And then the smoke kind of bulges up a bit and then starts to shrink. Sometimes it's fun to have things going in opposite directions of the main force just to add a little variety. And as you're going through here, you can look at your light screen. If you see things jittering, you can kind of correct that. You go over it in multiple passes and just kind of eyeball how things look and how things feel and adjust to your taste. It doesn't have to be perfect. The nice thing about kind of special effects type animation is, unlike human beings, special effects don't have these super articulate joints and pieces of body and mass that we're super used to seeing, and we can notice the problems in a human drawing, a drawing of a person. But things like smoke or water or fire is more open to stylization, in the sense that even the structure and the forms can be totally unique and bizarre, but you still know that it is smoke or fire or water just based on the way that it moves alone. So you can have a design that's really wonky, but it's all about the movement of that design. Alright, now I'm gonna make kind of a really big mass here. Just have some that are big, small, and medium. This one's gonna be big. Alright, because I don't want this loop to take 1,000,000,000 hours, what we're gonna do now is come down to the timeline, and you can see that this is 46 frames long. There's a lot of empty space here still. So what I'm gonna do is go to the halfway point at 23 frames, and I'm gonna copy the first 23 frames. So the first half of this animation I'm gonna copy, and then create a new layer, and then copy and paste that onto the layer. And then I'm gonna move these frames to the halfway mark, so that now we're gonna go through here and you can see that the frames I copied over here, these are the same frames from the beginning, just moved over towards the end. So now we have this situation going on, and all we have to do now is connect these empty spots. So what I'll do is just start drawing some frames here, and I'm just gonna connect it with some really big shapes so that this doesn't take forever. Finish the design of how I want this cloud to look, and then It's just a matter of connecting these empty spots. And I'm just doing one little part of this at a time. So I'm not drawing that whole big shape. I'm literally just drawing one line at a time. Before I go any further, so I don't mess this up, I'm actually gonna merge these two layers, and the starting frame is frame 22. So I'm going to merge these layers and then delete all the frames before 22, since those are duplicated at the 22 frame mark. It wouldn't make sense to draw over frames that we've already drawn. And the final thing to make your life easier when you're animating is to see this finished frame here. We're going to just go backwards and animate this frame 10 all the way down to 0. So I'm gonna get this entire part of the loop done. That way we can copy and paste this at the end of the cycle. So you'll see what I mean. Alright, everything is done from frame 10 down to 0. So this whole part is done. Now we just need to connect it towards the end. So I'm going to take frame 0, and this will be our reference frame. I'm going to paste it at the very end of this loop. And I'm just going to put a big X here for reference so that I don't accidentally draw on this or export this unnecessary frame. So this frame here is our reference, and we just have to connect all the frames in between 10 and 21. Now go back down to frame 10. Now go back down to frame 11 and just continue going forward. Alright, so that is my rough animation. Not perfect, but this is what I was able to do in about 20 minutes. When you're doing your cleanup animation, you might not want to literally trace these lines, but rather use them as a guide for your shadows. Just kind of feeling out the 3D form and imagining that the light source is coming from above. Where these lines converge right here, you can imagine the shape of this cloud here. You can imagine that the shadow is going to be pooling down here. Make that kind of V shape. And adding these cell shaded shadows is really going to make the design pop and feel a lot more, well, 3D obviously because you're shading it, but also just give it a lot more personality and definition and actually help you to see and understand what you're seeing a little bit better. Because when you just have a bundle of lines, it can be a little hard to discern exactly what you're looking at and what direction it's facing. Alright, and then after I got the base color in, I'm just creating another layer for the highlights, and I just do it on an add, you know, like you have multiply, screen, add, glow. Normally I just do it on another color layer and put the opacity down to about 50% and pick a different color. But I'm just seeing what this looks like on add, and I'm using the exact same color as the base color. And the highlights just further define the direction of the light source and also the 3D shape and what the texture kind of would feel like. I guess these are kind of bubbly clouds, so I'm giving it kind of bubble highlights here. So yeah, this is a way to animate clouds, smoke, and bubbles. To reiterate, you just start out with one blob and have an anchoring point to help you decide where it starts, and then draw a path of motion for that blob to move along. And remember that things don't just start out super fast. Things have to slow into their movement or ease into their movement. So things slow down and speed up. Keep all that in mind, and you can have these little balls of smoke or cloud pieces grow and then shrink and slow down as they get to their biggest part, and then slowly shrink back down, and you can have pieces break apart and dissipate. There's a lot you can do. It's just a matter of getting these flowy motions in as well. Clouds and smoke typically don't just move in a straight line. there is a wave motion to them. You can have a lot of fun. It's just something that takes a little bit of practice because it is very intuitive, and spend some time watching videos of maybe time lapses of clouds moving by. You can see how they change shape, and just observe a lot of reference of smoke and fire. The more you watch these shapes, the more it fills up your visual library, and you begin to understand and feel more how things would move. Speaking of smoke and fire, I do have a animation course specifically about animating fire. You can check it out from the links in the description or the card or the pinned comment. And it also comes with some animated fire loops that you can use in your own projects. Special thank you to my Patreon supporters who help make these videos possible. King Leo Picasso, Acer Vantes of Talon Music Group, Nick Marsden of Pleasure Fields, check out his work on Pleasure Wax Records on Bandcamp, King Crusader, Matteo Sigade, Rogue Deezy, Trace His Tracks, A-Wire, Whoop X2. If you'd like a shout out for your name or site, you can join the Shoutout Patreon tier, which includes a verbal shout out at the end of my videos, as well as all previous tier rewards. The other rewards you'll get include 9 new animated loops on the first of every month. You can use these animation clips in your own videos for personal and commercial use. You'll also get behind the scenes work like storyboards from my films, albums I've recorded, and other downloadable goodies. Thank you so much for liking and subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video.